Hi, I'm beating every classic game on Nintendo Switch Online, but pretending like it was a time before the internet, so I thought it would make sense to start with the game I've never played before, Banjo Kazooie. Luckily for me, this was the most requested N64 game from my NSO Backlog poll, link in the description, by the way. I feel like this game is a prime relic of 90s nostalgia. Since I was born in 2000, this was before my time. I never even heard about this game until YouTube, probably in a Did You Know Gaming video or something, but after that, the internet made sure that I should care about Banjo. During E3 2019, when Banjo and Kazooie were revealed as Smash Ultimate DLC, I witnessed the sheer amount of excitement and I was like, yeah, woo, Banjo, I definitely know who I'm excited about. But I figured that it's finally time to see what all the hype is about. So let me take you on a journey as I play one of the most iconic collectathons for the very first time. And oh boy, do I have many thoughts. Starting with the opening cutscene, it already felt like a 90s Saturday morning cartoon and I'm here for it. The premise itself of this wicked witch stealing Banjo's sister while he was sleeping is definitely something I'd see from Cartoon Network. I quickly noticed that this game is so reliant on wacky voices and sound effects. So right off the bat, I knew it would never take itself too seriously, which is right up my alley. As a first-time player, I could tell that I was gonna be fumbling around more than I'd like to admit, which was apparent in this game's first level, Mumbo's Mountain. To be fair, it front-loads a lot of mechanics on you, like new moves and collectibles. I have now learned that basically every collectible is important, but I didn't know that then. I was basically trying to grasp everything being thrown at me. It was similar enough to Mario 64's controls, but with more complex button combinations. My poor ZL button has been used and abused throughout this entire playthrough. Despite being the beginner level, it felt like there was so much to explore and discover, so much that I didn't know what to expect. And as I collected more jiggies and notes throughout Mumbo's Mountain, I kept thinking, so where's the next level? I was hoping for like a goalpost or something. How naive of me. Like I said, totally unaware of how a Banjo game works. But the first level did serve as a good basis of what I needed to focus on. Collectibles galore. I was ready to move on to the next level, but the issue was, I couldn't find it. I thought this game was gonna be far more linear than it actually was. When you need to progress, you must check everywhere. Also, apparently unlocking the level and finding it are two completely different things in completely separate areas. With Mumbo's Mountain, it was simple because both were in the same room, and I assumed that was going to set the precedent. Nope. It took me a good 15 minutes to find the next level, but in a stroke of luck, I found this random entrance down below and jumped straight into the very tropical Treasure Trove Cove. This is when I felt like the game truly opened up. So much to explore, so many secrets to uncover. I was getting the hang of finding jiggies. The more I found, the more satisfying it was. I loved how a lot of them had backstories, trying to solve them using the tools you had. This level focused on two abilities, swimming and flying. After playing through this entire game, I can confidently say that I do not like the swimming controls at all. I don't mind them in other 3D platformers, but I never got the hang of it in Banjo Kazooie. Even by the end of the game, it was extremely easy for me to become disoriented, either moving way too slow or swimming way too far. The very rude sharks did not help me grasp the controls either. Plus there was no way to attack in the water, so swimming just felt like an inconvenience rather than a feature. I basically avoided swimming as much as possible. The other ability I unlocked was flying, which was slightly better to control, albeit still a bit janky. Back on the ground, I actually used my brain and defeated the crab using one of my attacks. Wow, I thought the crab was just gonna give me a jiggy, but what I didn't expect was being able to enter it. Inside of the shell was super cool, until I died to more crabs inside somehow. clearly getting better at the game, and this is when I felt the consequences of my actions. When you die, you keep certain collectibles like the very important jiggies, thank god, but you lose all of the music notes you collected, only keeping your highest total, meaning you have to recollect them and find more to beat your high score. I like collecting, but not that much, so I moved on. But Treasure Trove Cove is a very solid level. I realized that finding levels was gonna be my Achilles heel. Unlocking new levels with my abundance of jiggies was easy, but could I find them? Apparently not. I feel like half of my playtime was spent wandering around aimlessly until I happened to stumble upon the next area. Aside from my directional challenges, I was genuinely impressed by the hub design. So much detail in every area, taking in the mesmerizing sight of Gruntilda's floor face. But next was Clanker's Cavern. A level with even more swimming. How lovely. And by lovely, I mean personal attack. Not gonna lie, this level kinda broke me. I was perpetually lost, constantly taking damage. I was trying to find the next molehill for so long, which is required to progress. I mean, Bottles did say he was well hidden, but that didn't make it any easier for me. I couldn't make any meaningful progress because I was so lost. And it didn't help that a lot of jiggies were cryptic. For example, I couldn't figure out how Clanker, the big shark in the middle, could use some air. So after checking almost every area, I randomly came across this giant key at the very bottom, and swimming through it 3 times somehow sets the shark free? That's quite a solution, but eventually, I had a revelation. So remember in the last level, I found out that I could enter that shell? Turns out, I can also enter Clanker, inside the blowhole. Alright, rule number 1 of Banjo Kazooie, try to enter everything. And of course, the molehill was inside the shark. Like, how did you even end up here in the first place? After that, things started moving along, finding more jiggies, thanks to the new invincibility feathers. I will admit, wandering around in a shark's body was a really cool concept, but even with that, this is the first level that I straight up didn't like. A lot of the objectives weren't clear to me, so I ended up wasting a bunch of time. It could not convince me that swimming was any less horrendous, and basing an entire level around that, not so great in my book. However, this level really taught me to be more experimental with my solutions, but thankfully, I found enough jiggies to move on. I noticed that Gruntilda's nicer sister, Brentilda, was very clearly trying to tell me something. I didn't know why she was emphasizing such random facts about Gruntilda, but I kept seeing her in various places around the hub, so I figured I should probably jot these phrases down for something. That's right, I literally went all around the layer and carefully wrote down everything Brentilda had to say in a physical notebook. I can't tell if this is a flex or not. After doing my gaming homework, I finally moved on to the next level, Bubblegloop Swamp. In which I found bottles in less than 30 seconds. I'm bitter. Poisonous swamp water was now a thing, so I had to actually try to be careful with my movements. Gross. Compared to Super Mario 64's more simplistic find the star goals, these objectives had more context and felt like self-contained stories. For example, I felt kinda bad just trampling onto these frogs' territory and snatching the jiggy, despite them just trying to protect their prized possession. It's those little moments that make Bubblegloop Swamp just work for me. I still had some frustrating moments, like failing to reach this jiggy under a timer for 5 whole minutes, but overall, I really enjoyed this level's variety, transforming into a small crocodile, entering a giant crocodile, and competing against another crocodile. Like only Banjo can pull that off. Believe it or not, I actually liked this level. I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but I certainly enjoyed it more than Clanker's Cavern. The jiggies were less cryptic and most importantly, more fun to grab. Because exploring was much more enjoyable, I found all 100 notes for the first time. That's when you know you have a solid Banjo level. As I explored deeper into Gruntilda's lair, I came to appreciate how the main theme morphed into whatever environment I was in. Leading up to a very obvious icy level, the music was appropriately Christmassy but still has that Gruntilda flair. But now it's time to enter the obligatory ice level with Banjo's face on it, Freezeezy Peak. Now, the general consensus is that a lot of people hate ice levels, usually because of the slippery controls. I actually prefer them over water levels because I tend to have better control on ice, rather than always feeling vulnerable underwater. Freezeezy Peak is pretty much the most ice level of ice levels. This is when I felt a difficulty jump, because not only do you have to deal with slippery Banjo, but you also have the rudest enemies in the whole game. You would think that literal ice cubes pose no threat, but no. The amount of damage I've taken from them is embarrassing. So now I canonically hate ice cubes. There's this move called the Beak Bomb where you launch yourself like a missile, but without any target guiding you. Most times, I just hoped that I would actually hit my target. Two mixed results. The snowmen apparently throw snowballs of steel, and the only way to defeat them is the janky Beak Bomb. Flying in this level felt way more deadly, because you can take serious damage if you aren't careful enough, which I am definitely careful enough at this point. Even without flying, Freezeezy Peak is when I really felt like I was taking way too much damage. Whether it's from my dumb platforming mistakes or the enemies having no chill, losing progress when I died was not exactly uplifting. For example, at the beginning of the level, these kids wanted someone to bring them presents and it took me 3 attempts to do so because I kept dying at the dumbest times. Don't get me wrong, I definitely had some fun moments, like I didn't expect to slam my sled into a bear's belly from across the level, but I really felt the growing pains of a 90s 3D platformer here. For a level designed to appeal to Christmas time, I'm glad that it wasn't too on the nose. Unique elements prevent it from being a generic snow level, TM. Overall, I didn't hate this level, but it showcased just how fragile Banjo and Kazooie are. Or maybe I'm still bad. By the way, this random snowman kept attacking me as I was leaving Freezeezy Peak. Like I said, such rude enemies. Like, leave me alone. I'd say we're about halfway into this game. Let's see how much I've improved my platforming. So we're doing great. Gobi's Valley is quite an interesting level. Each pyramid contains a different set of challenges to earn a Jiggy, and in order to get in, you have to accomplish a certain task, like hitting a target or making it in before the door closes. There's this one where you hit the switch and you have to use these special dashing shoes all the way to the top hole before it closes. It was such a strict timer that took way too many attempts, but we're not going to talk about that. I don't know what it is with mini challenges that feel so satisfying to me, possibly because of my Mario Party obsession. This level was also a bit smaller, which is a positive for me. It feels more concentrated rather than overwhelming. The enemies were also way less rude, thankfully. What I did not appreciate was running through a maze under a stressful time limit. I was able to get through, but I don't exactly do well under pressure. Again, with the theme of everything talking. The camel talked, the not sphinx talked, even the tree talked. I may have gotten a game over while trying to complete a matching game, but ignore that part. Overall, I really enjoyed this level. The enemies weren't too intrusive, the missions were straightforward and fun, and I felt like I was really hitting my stride. I spent quite a while running around because it was genuinely exciting looking for everything in this level. Gobi's Valley might just be my favorite level in the whole game. I'm glad that so far, I don't have to collect everything to feel like I explored enough. Surely this will not backfire. I found it annoying that every time you start this game, you're always at the very beginning of Gruntilda's lair, near the very first level in the game. So if I'm on my 6th level, that means every time I begin my session, I must trek all the way back through a very specific path over and over until I reach the level I need to enter. And Gruntilda's lair was not a hub I could easily navigate. There were so many different areas and crevices to keep track of. There were shortcuts here and there, but you still gotta make the trek, one way or another. I wish I could begin outside the last level I entered, but I guess it wasn't meant to be. At least by the end of the game, I had the layout of the hub burned into my memory, against my will. After many failed attempts, I got my revenge by defeating the rude snowman outside Freezeezy Peak with my janky beak bomb. The reward was not worth it. Onto the spooky, scary Mad Monster Mansion. I find it kinda charming that they went for all the classic video game themes. You know, desert, snow, water, and now spooky mansion. I wonder if by the 90s, those tropes became tired concepts. Already, I struggled to figure out how to enter the mansion. I couldn't get far outside either, since these gates with locks held me back. So my brain was like, okay, obviously I need some sort of key. So what do? That's right, aimlessly wander around until I find something. Like, I knew I could explore more areas, I just didn't know how. And then I tried ground pounding this random shaft, and of course it worked. Then I tried attacking the windows, and of course they broke instantly. And remember the gates that clearly had locks on them? I attacked them with Kazooie's beak, and obviously that opens them right up, cause that makes sense. They really need to tighten their security. Rule number 2 of Banjo Kazooie: violence is the answer. But after that revelation, that's when the level finally opened up. It may not be the biggest level in the game, but it felt like such a confusing mess. On top of the vast outside portion, you also have several rooms inside the mansion and inside the church. Oh yeah, don't forget Mumbo's hut. And that was a whole ordeal trying to reach it. That's the biggest problem I have with this level. Half of it is literally gatekept unless you know to break down their barriers, or know the right path. Without that knowledge, you're stuck wandering around for some kind of key that doesn't exist. To me, there wasn't any indication that I could destroy doors or gates. If you can so easily get rid of these barriers, why have them in the first place? The camera also did not help either, obscuring certain entrances that could have been very helpful if I could see them. Needless to say, I found this level a lot more frustrating than fun. It's not Clanker's Cavern levels of unfun, but I felt like it could have been designed with a lot more clarity, or at least less barriers to entry. After escaping that level, I was immediately lost again. What's new? I already found this water area, so I knew I had to progress here somehow. Usually I'm good with finding puzzle piece rooms. I just have trouble finding the levels themselves. In this case, I couldn't even find both. I had to resort to a friend again, and only with their many hints was I finally able to unlock the next level. And guess what? It was because I needed to break this metal crate. I know I just said that violence is the answer, but like, what? I thought this was a background element. Does anything make sense anymore? Rusty Bucket Bay. Or as I like to call it, Crusty Bucket Bay. You'll know why. Once again, a brand new wide open level. Did not know where I was going. There was the main ship, but also the whole outside area with crates, buildings, and cranes. The rude enemies make a return. Yay. I know they're Gruntilda's creations, but like, what does the lifesaver have against me? Walking on the skinniest platforms imaginable was very stressful, and on top of that, falling into the water kindly takes away your air, even if you swim along the surface. So pretty much all my worst nightmares wrapped into a level. Just like Mad Monster Mansion, I was trying to enter the ship, but couldn't figure out how, so I resorted to my bread and butter of wandering around the perimeter until I found a solution. It did work for one mission though. I used these numbers as context clues and secured my first Jiggy, so I am learning, ever so slightly, but that's about where my deductive skills end. I struggled so hard trying to find more Jiggies. The outside crates didn't have anything that useful in them. I didn't find the navigation itself to be that feasible either. I eventually found multiple entrances to the ship, but I was already flustered at that point. And please let me just rant about the stupid dumb room. These fans are so rude. These spinning platforms do not make it any easier, and if you fall off once, you just die and have to start all over for this one Jiggy. I died so many times, to the point where I got a game over because the punishment was so brutal. I hate this room so much. Just thinking about it makes me hate it even more. You cannot pay me enough to enter that room ever again. I wouldn't be complaining as much if I was able to find most of the Jiggies, but I didn't. Everything felt so cryptic that I collected the least amount of Jiggies out of all the levels. And it's not because I rushed it, trust me. I explored as much as I could, but to no avail. It got to a point where my friends gave me even more hints on where most of the jiggies were. As you can tell, this is my least favorite level. Yes, even more than Clanker's Cavern. I'm sure there are lots of people who love this level, but I just can't get behind it. I'm sorry. Everything about it just frustrated me. Ridiculously tight platforming with awful consequences, very cryptic objectives, and no easy way to traverse throughout the level. I never wanted to return to this level ever again, even if I had the least amount of collectibles in it. That fiasco hit me hard because I was 38 notes short of unlocking the next door, so I had to go back to previous levels and collect more notes than before. Gobi's Valley it is, because it was the least annoying. Legit, I don't know how long I would have taken to beat this game as a kid. If at all, I tended to either give up easily or take months to beat. There was no in between, but after collecting enough notes, I finally got through the door and entered the last level in this game, Click Clock Wood. Based on the starting room, I assumed this level revolved around the 4 seasons, which is totally up my alley. Wait, but that means... oh god, those ice cubes are back. My mortal enemies. Thankfully, the spring area was first. Unlike Mad Monster Mansion, I was able to find Mumbo's hut instantly and transformed into the very chonky bee. This is when I noticed how tall this level is, which means more opportunities dying from fall damage. Great. I encountered a new, whole enemy, a bird, much less rude than that chomper in Clanker's Cavern. And since then, I have learned how to deal with these types of enemies, and I guess doors as well, with violence. I only secured a couple jiggies in the spring area, and before I knew it, I found a switch that opened up the summer door, so I could tell that this is gonna be a massive level. Entering the summer area, I noticed that the layout looked eerily similar to the spring, and that's when I realized it's gonna be the same area but coated in different seasons. I'm a sucker for levels that remix themes around one core area. After a few minutes of exploring the summer area, I immediately found the fall button. If only the rest of the game was this simple. I had a near-death experience when these bees were trying to protect their precious honey. Sounds selfish to me. I just wanted the shiny object for myself. I've been told that this level might be tedious, and I can see why. It's because of the verticality. Banjo and Kazooie are very fragile, especially when it comes to fall damage. Sure, they can hover for a few seconds, but after you fall past a certain distance, it's pretty much game over. So imagine that risk, but inside the tallest level in the game. Yeah, needless to say, I was on edge throughout the entire level, because enough mistakes would cost me a bunch of musical notes. Trying to jump in and out of these holes proved to be more of a challenge than I'd like to admit, but one really cool element is that various animals will have different interactions with you depending on the season. For example, the squirrel inside the tree was eating a ton of acorns during the spring, but ate all of them during the summer, or helping hatch an egg and watching the bird grow up throughout the seasons. I really love when they showcase storytelling throughout these kinds of changes, but now it's time for the fall/autumn area. Easily the prettiest part of the game in my opinion. I'm not really a die-hard fall lover, but I really appreciate good fall aesthetics when I see them. Finding the winter button was a tough climb, since it was very high up the tree. Nothing too spectacular happened here, but I was happily taking in all the gorgeous colors in the process. I kept tabs on all the animals I've helped throughout the seasons, and I assumed that if I helped them in every season, I'll get a reward in the end, like maybe a jiggy? Please? But before I could see the fruits of my labor, I had to go through winter, and wouldn't you know it, those awful ice cubes and snowmen were back. I hate it here already. This is when I finally figured out that I could cross these gaps much easier with a feathery flap, basically trivializing all those times I fell to the bottom. I guess better late than never. After a little tomfoolery with the wacky camera, it turns out I was rewarded for helping this bird out throughout the seasons. That's what I love to see. After that, I felt like I explored enough of that level, so I decided to move on. But overall, I actually enjoyed Click Clock Wood. It's a gargantuan level, with lots of challenging, frustrating, and nerve-wracking moments. The changing seasons is what carried the level for me, so I was able to forgive those really punishing heights. Despite arguably being the most difficult level in the game, it was actually quite respectable in my book. That fun didn't last long because I still didn't have enough notes to open the next door, which wanted 765. I was 49 notes short, meaning that I had to collect even more notes in past levels. I know this is a collectathon, but 765? That seems like a tall order. While I'm glad that each level keeps track of your highest note count, I did not want to collect them all again. But alas, I still gotta do it. This was gonna take a while, so I decided to bust out the official player's guide that I definitely own a copy of. Because I already knew that I'd be aimless for 5 more hours without it. I never got to experience physical strategy guides as a kid, so I really appreciate how much character this guide has, and how extremely helpful it was locating those remaining collectibles. I got a bit of nostalgia going through each level I played. I realized that Mumbo's Mountain wasn't as confusing or difficult as I thought. Still didn't like revisiting Clanker's Cavern, but hey, at least I died less. But after collecting just enough notes, I finally advanced to the next area and saw a very special flashing space with 2D's face on it. Oh no, what now? This is gonna be painful, but let's get this over with. In typical Gruntilda fashion, she loves to play games with us, except this time, it's an actual game within a game. Grunty's Furnace Fun. She did not come to play. Well, I guess she literally did. This seems like my kind of torture. I mean, what? Turns out it's a board game / quiz show thing. Uh-oh. Well, I'm glad I did my Gruntilda homework. I quickly grabbed my handy dandy notebook, but then I came across the first question that had nothing to do with Gruntilda. So unfortunately, I wasn't getting off scot-free. I actually had to use my brain? Ew. Most of the questions were simple enough. If you paid enough attention to the game, you'd know the answer. But then I got to the physical challenges, where I had to perform tasks under a timer. Yeah, I failed those pretty quickly. I got too many questions wrong and I had to start over. Gruntilda, you are so rude. But thankfully she wasn't that heartless because I tried a different route and found a joker space, letting me skip spaces if I answered a question right. So you know I'm abusing that on any future times challenges. My favorite spaces were these observational ones, where they tend to zoom in on a really low quality texture. I've been in these levels for hours, so I've definitely studied their environments against my will. What I don't appreciate is that if you get a question wrong on these skull spaces, you get flung into the lava and you have to start all over. No mercy. I may have failed this board 2, 3, maybe even 15 times because of these skull spaces. But that's normal, right? But I did have a method to the madness. I took a very specific route trying to get as many jokers as possible, skipping anything deemed too risky, especially those physical challenges. No thank you. Every time I failed to answer the joker question right, I just went back and restarted the whole thing, cause I didn't want to risk it. It wasn't a perfect plan. I couldn't really avoid too many of those skull questions, and of course I would fail those specific ones, but to spare you the painful details, after many fruitless attempts, I finally made it across the board, and then Gruntilda ran away like a sore loser. Typical, but after she left, the credits started rolling, but something was off about them. This definitely isn't the true ending. Everyone was partying, enjoying their time, but 2D's like, y'all didn't even finish the job. 2D, after everything I've been through, I don't want to hear it from you, but I guess we actually have to beat Gruntilda now. Lame. So I went all the way back to the very top and saw one last puzzle to complete, requiring 25 jiggies? I was 8 short. I didn't expect a collectathon to be this intense. So, once again, I scraped through every level to find the easiest jiggies. It took a very long time, but I was finally able to move on to the last challenge of this game, beating up a crusty witch. It's time to enter the final cauldron and end this journey once and for all. and I fell off a cliff in less than a minute. Such a hero. Gruntilda put up quite a fight with her 5 phases. Thankfully, her first phase was very easy, avoiding her broomstick and attacking while she's stationary. The second phase was very tough for me. You have to avoid her fireballs and in between, shoot eggs at her at a very specific angle. She even tries to predict your movements and overshoots to throw you off. I never liked this phase. It takes way too long if you're not precise, and you could easily get caught off guard. In the third phase, you have to fly up and utilize the wonderfully janky beak bomb to attack her in the air. I may have died the most during this phase because I overshot my beak bomb, hit the edge of the platform, and promptly fell to my death. The fourth phase involves shooting enough eggs into 4 Jinjo statues, which will attack Gruntilda. She's still hurling fireballs at you, by the way, and if you somehow get through all that chaos, her final phase involves shooting eggs on all 4 sides of a giant Jinjo statue, with Gruntilda constantly attacking you. I don't know how this fight is even remotely fair. I know this is the final boss, but I can't imagine little Timmy in 98 beating Gruntilda on his first try, and every single time you lose, you always restart from phase 1, and they don't even have the courtesy to refill your ammo. I was not having fun in the slightest. I consulted my friends and he agreed that the final boss was just awful, but also encouraged me to collect even more notes to unlock a couple doors in the final area. So after dying like 20 times, I took his advice and scrubbed through every level again, collecting every note I could find. Except you cannot make me go back to Krusty Bucket Bay. Just to unlock the first 2 doors, you needed 846 notes. For reference, there are 9 levels, each containing 100 notes. So in total, 900 notes in the entire game. 846 out of 900. That is 94% of all notes. The last 2 doors have even higher totals. That is a ridiculously high requirement for a better chance against Gruntilda. The 2 doors I unlocked were egg and feather refillers. How convenient. I'm not bitter at all. My friend could tell that I was really struggling, so he gave me some helpful pointers in the final 2 phases. Basically, I should only shoot 3 eggs at once and then move out of the way before I got hit by fireballs. Even if I missed all my shots, it was not worth taking damage, which sounded like a very solid strategy. The first time I got to the last phases, I was just panicking and trying to figure out what to even do, but with my newfound knowledge, and after falling to my death a few more times, I implemented the strategy and it worked like a charm. Rule number 3 of Banjo Kazooie: actually use your brain. You don't know how relieved I was finally defeating Gruntilda. When she fell to the ground, I was like, good, suffer. To this day, I still think that final boss fight was awful, unfair, and just not fun. Sure, I could have an easier time beating her now, but every successive death felt more demoralizing. In fact, how many times did I die to Gruntilda? Yeah, I'm never doing that fight ever again. Admittedly, it was a very sour experience right at the end, but I'm glad to say that I officially beat Banjo Kazooie. I can see why people fell in love with this game. It felt like one giant scavenger hunt. It can be exciting looking through every nook and cranny, and the characters themselves really carry this game's personality. You can't mistake this game for anything else, and I think that's special. So after everything, what do I think of Banjo Kazooie? Well, I do respect the game a lot more now. It really throws you into the fray and expects you to find everything on your own, but it also rewards you for the progress you've made. In most cases, you don't have to completely start from scratch if you mess up and die. One detail I really loved was solving various problems, showcasing the impact you've made in each level. Plus, who doesn't love transforming into silly little creatures throughout the game? There's clearly a lot of love and care put into every aspect, but I'm not gonna lie, it has aged. The biggest issue is how clunky Banjo's moveset is. I felt like I was constantly at a disadvantage. I can't fall fall too far or else I'll take serious damage. I can't attack things with confidence because the range feels too short and sluggish. And I was basically helpless underwater at all times. I would take Banjo's controls over Mario 64's controls any day, but they still had yet to be perfected. And that's okay. It's still an important stepping stone. Would I have liked this game growing up? It's hard to tell, but I know I would take at least 3 years to beat, especially if I played it as a kid. It's not something that I could just blast through over a couple of weeks. Would I play this game again? Big fat no. While I love the legacy and charm, the frustrating parts stuck out to me like a sore thumb. And it's not like I could ignore those parts because they were all important. If the collectible requirements were much lower, I would 100% replay this game. But as it stands, I think I've had enough Banjo for a while. At least until Nintendo announces Banjo Tooie, and I get to fall off 50 million more times. Only time will tell. Hey, thank you so much for watching this pilot episode of the NSO Backlog. This first game became much bigger than I planned, but I'm very happy with the story I was able to tell, and hopefully you enjoyed it too. If you have another NSO game in mind, please consider voting in the NSO Backlog poll. Link in the description, of course, even if you already voted before. The poll is always open for you to vote again, as more games will always be added. But that's it from me. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.